And thank you to an awesome team of panelists that have joined us today to talk about this topic. We're really excited but wanting to get started, and we do have some housekeeping items to go over. Due to the number of participants today, we've automatically muted your phones to eliminate interferences. Please enter any questions or comments into the chat box. If you have something to add to the conversation, please note it in the chat box and we will call on you. You may also send questions by email to professional@asce.org. I know some people have called in, so maybe they don't have access to the chat box. So that's definitely something that you can send questions there as well, professional@asce.org. Also, please close all your other applications, especially email, so that your system will run smoothly. And please keep all conversations geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. We will begin today's roundtable with introductions from our panelists. Then each panelist will share their perspective and insights on the topic of positioning yourself for employment during COVID-19. The panelists will also respond to questions from the audience. It is now my pleasure to welcome our panelists. We have Alyssa Dixon, who's a member of the ASCE Committee on Younger Members. We have Kelly Kasilica, who's a lecturer at the College of Engineering at the University of Nevada, Reno. Christina Swallow, who's the director for the Nevada Department of Transportation, and Marley Walton, who's a professor at Iowa State University. So Alyssa, do you want to go ahead and start off with introductions?
Of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Dixon. I'm from Seattle, and I graduated in 2012. And I've been working in different consulting positions since then. It took me a little while to find work outside of school. The economy was still kind of coming back from the 2008 recession, and that's why I'm hopefully able to help you guys out with some advice today. I am on the Committee on Younger Members. I'm also the board representative for the Seattle YMF, so I sit on our section level board too.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Kelly Kasilica. I'm a lecturer at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I've been working at UNR, well, as a lecturer for about 4 years now. But I graduated from graduate school in 2008 when the economy wasn't great and a lot of people were having trouble finding jobs. My first job was actually at the Nevada Department of Transportation, where Christina now works. And then I moved over to the university. So I actually didn't experience too much trouble, but I think it was just kind of good timing, knowing people, having networked through ASCE, and that really did help me leverage a position both at the Nevada Department of Transportation and also the university.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. You have an excellent perspective to share.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Awesome. Christina, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Christina Swallow. As mentioned, I'm the director of the Nevada Department of Transportation. I graduated a while before Alyssa and Kelly. Back in 1994, I've had several different kinds of jobs over the time since then. I've been a consultant. I've worked actually on Capitol Hill as a legislative aide, worked at the city of Las Vegas, and most recently have this job at NDOT. I've been in this role for a little over a year, and I'm continuing to learn, and this COVID crisis is definitely challenging everybody and challenging all of the things that I need to know about the organization. I would say that in 1994, it wasn't nearly as bad as it was in 2008, but it was a little bit of a slower market, and had to work through that, and that has probably shaped, and ASCE definitely shaped my career path. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Christina. We really appreciate it. Marley, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next? Oh, Marley, you're on mute. If I had $1 for every time I've done that this week.
Okay. Is that better?
Yep, we can hear you.
Wonderful. All right. So Marley Walton, professor of education at Iowa State University, and I am the one here with the most experience. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in the 1980s when there was a recession. So I can kind of relate. I don't think it's quite as bad as the COVID environment, but I can still relate to the struggles. I guess it was also a little harder for me because When I graduated, I was married and my husband was still seeking his degree. So I also had to shop locally for a job. So I had two restrictions, the recession and having to work within a local environment. But I felt pretty fortunate that I was able to find a job. I worked for the Iowa Department of Transportation. So Kelly and I have kind of similar backgrounds. Started with the Iowa DOT. And then after I worked there, I took the position at Iowa State University.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us.
Uh-huh.
So we want to start off with a basic question today is, what were some of the barriers that you faced as you were looking for your first job? Alyssa, do you want to go ahead and start off?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I graduated in 2012 and was looking for work around then. Most of the engineering consulting firms that I was talking to in Seattle really weren't looking to hire, or they hadn't hired anybody entry level for a very long time. So there was kind of the risk associated with that. You're taking a chance on hiring somebody who doesn't have consulting experience yet. So I was lucky enough to live with my parents during that time, so I didn't have to deal with paying rent or anything. But it took me about 4 months to get a part-time job, and then another 6 months to get full-time employment at two different consulting firms. So I was just doing a lot of networking and everything, but everybody I was talking to was like, "You seem great, but we're not hiring right now. Like, keep in touch," and then the next person. So I think that just the amount of time and the legwork it took to finally get somebody who was looking and willing to take a chance was the challenge that I went through, at least.
Yeah, they say it's a full-time job trying to find a job, right?
Definitely it was.
Yeah. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and share some of the barriers that you faced upon entering the job market?
Sure. I went right into graduate school after I got my bachelor's degree. So I was in grad school at the time, and I had friends who worked at NDOT, and I really thought that I wanted to go into bridge design at that point in time. So they told me about the position, and I wasn't quite finished with my research at that point. And I decided to apply for the position, even though I hadn't quite defended my thesis or done anything like that. And I think my advisor was a little upset with me, but I applied and they wanted to hire me. And I was like, I have to jump on this opportunity because it doesn't always come around. And a lot of the institutions at that point in time had hiring freezes. And so I jumped on the opportunity and I was able to kind of defend pretty quickly and then finish up some work throughout the semester. So he was actually very flexible with me, but it was just, I saw the opportunity and I had to take it because there wasn't a lot out there.
Yeah, that's good to know, right? As people start positioning themselves, into the summer months. Christina, do you want to go ahead and share your experience?
Yeah, so when I graduated, as I mentioned, it was in the early 90s, and the market was a little bit slow, and nowhere near what it's probably like right now, and definitely not what it was like in 2008. But it was a little bit slow, so I had several of my other graduating students were also like, we were all just graduated, no job, and had been doing all of the things you were supposed to be doing in our local community. My mom didn't think that was enough. So she actually started taking me on the Christina's going to get a job roadshow. And the first stop was Phoenix. I should say I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, went to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And so first stop was Phoenix. She had some conference or something, I don't even know. And while she was conferencing, I was supposed to be out hitting the pavement. And I mentioned it's the early 90s, so no email, no real way to connect other than via the phone, fax, or walking in the door. Didn't find anything in Phoenix, so the next stop was Las Vegas. Actually, the excuse for that one was Grandma and Mom and I were going to go see a show in Vegas, and while we were there, I was going to look for a job. And fortunately, I did a lot. I went to a lot of places on the very first day of doing this, and nobody really had time. Like if you go and you don't know a name, you don't have any contacts. They don't really have time. And so at the end of that day, I actually met somebody. He said when she went back and asked, could he meet with me? He said he had 10 minutes. He spent 2 hours. He gave me the name of every single office manager in town, so that the next day I had a list, I had names, and I was able to get past the front door. I should say he was the immediate past president of either the branch or the section, I'm not entirely sure, of ASCE. And so that really just, and I hadn't been an ASC member, so I didn't really understand that until then. And the very first place I went in the next day, got past the front door and was able to get a job. And I think, and later, many of my friends from school actually also came up because I had the magic list. And I think what I learned from that and how that applies to today is that I had to go somewhere else. Later I did get offers in Phoenix and Tucson, and I probably could have, if I was willing to wait a little bit longer, stayed in my local community. But the goal was to get a job, and I went to a place that was hiring. In Vegas, they were a little further out of the recession that had happened, and so they were. I joked they were checking pulses. But I had to find that place. And I think that that's something that we're going to be seeing with COVID. And just this morning on the news, they were talking about the fact that we're going to start to release at different paces, and some areas may release sooner than others. And so it may be that if you really want to get a job, you may just have to go somewhere else and be willing and flexible to do that. Vegas, when you're 21, maybe should be thought about a little bit more than my mom thought about that, but it served me well, got me a good job, and kicked me off on my career. So
awesome. Well, that's quite a story, Christina. Marley, do you want to go ahead and share what some of the barriers that you faced during your first position?
Okay, like I mentioned, started working at the Department of Transportation, which I had the advantage, and maybe it was a disadvantage too, that I graduated with my bachelor's degree from Iowa State University, and the Department of Transportation's in the same town. So that's the advantage, because it's there. And like I mentioned, I was married, waiting for my husband to finish his degree, so didn't really want to live apart from him. So it was close, it was convenient. I guess the disadvantage was a lot of people were graduating, the recession's going on, and the DOT is very convenient. So there was a lot of competition. So I think with that, it required a lot of persistency and contacting them and letting them know I was very interested in the position without being annoying. So I think there's kind of that fine line. You want to follow through. You want to make sure that they are aware that you're there without kind of being a thorn in their side, bugging them all the time. So like Christina, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the social media to use that outlet. So it was more the phone calls, the one-on-one conversations with those people. But I think that's kind of the key is, be persistent if you really want those positions. And also, the flexibility is kind of key too, because as an undergraduate, I did kind of have this perception of I wanted to work in the private firm. That was my dream. And those positions weren't available, so I kind of felt like, well, this isn't my ideal job, but at least at the time I was employed and I was happy to be employed. And actually it turned out to be a good fit for me. And I was very happy with the position after I took it.
Yeah, absolutely. So both Christina and Marley, you have mentioned flexibility being key. So that's, great advice and a good thing for people to think about. I do want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If you're not able to access the chat, you can also email them to professional@asce.org, and we'll be sharing those with everyone too. If you have any questions, this is a great panel with some great insights. So please share any of your questions that you may have. So the next question that we have is, has COVID-19 affected your organization's hiring decisions? And if so, in what ways? Christina, do you want to speak to that?
I can. It's going to be a pretty short speaking to it, though. Unfortunately, here in Nevada, all state agencies are now on a hiring freeze as we evaluate the impact of COVID. It's not just that the social separation, and it would be hard to hire people right now anyway, because we'd have to onboard them and all of that. It's also the potential economic impact of COVID that we're going to be seeing broadly across government, not just, we're also seeing it at the DOT, we're seeing this financial impact. And so we're on a hiring freeze, and to the point that I even had to cancel our summer intern program yesterday, which broke my heart because I love being able to provide that opportunity. I can't tell you how many people, we have 3 of the 4 of us have had a position at a DOT, But if you, as you go into your career, and and anyone who's deep into their career, that have probably met, it's at least 10 to 20% of civil engineers have had some exposure to working at a DOT, and many of them did it as a summer intern. So that broke my heart. So we're on the hiring freeze, and we just and we're working to figure out if we can hire key positions, and really having to work on prioritizing which positions we'll even ask to hire, which is a huge challenge, because as I was telling our team the other day, none of our positions are extra. None of the positions are positions that we don't need, that we're just like, hey, I have a friend, you want to come hang out? They're all positions that we need to fill. And so being on this hiring freeze is going to be really challenging, because we still have folks that are retiring, we have folks that are switching positions, and we have to backfill those too. So as we look to fill positions moving forward, or get permission to fill during the freeze, it's going to be really a prioritized basis.
Yeah, it's sad to think about all the internship programs that have really been put on hold. Mm-hmm. Marley, is that something that you're able to talk about, what you've done at your university?
Yes, we are not having a hiring freeze. We are still hiring, although we are considering, how urgent is the need for the position, because obviously the environment has changed. We're currently 100% online, and so it's a change, and so we're adapting. But we are hiring, because we are having people, like Christina said, people are retiring. We need to fill the positions. It's not just that we have positions out there that don't have a need. We have a need for the positions, or people are moving around. So we are doing the hiring, just really evaluating, is this the right time to do the hiring? And then, of course, with the new environment, as we're doing the hiring, I think it's impacting how we're evaluating the candidates, because obviously we need for them to be very flexible, to be able to adapt to work in the new environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, knowing that you're still doing hiring, obviously you'll be looking at some resumes. Our next question is, in reviewing resumes, what would stand out right now? Alyssa, is that something that you can speak to, as far as, what you look for when you review a resume?
Yeah, for sure. I think that primary first glance at a resume, like, make sure spelling's right and grammar's right, because those things, if they stand out, and they're an immediate sign that you're not detail oriented or paying attention, or kind of implies that you don't care as much. So at least do the spell check, do the grammar check. I think kind of diversity of experience is good, showing that you have different interests, but also communicating kind of through different interests, if you have those, what you're trying to, like, what you want to do in your career. If you're coming from a lot of different places, or maybe you didn't have direct internship experience in engineering, being able to say what you've learned from the other positions that you have had, or volunteer opportunities, or research in school, and how that then applies to what you're excited about doing as a civil engineer. I also really like cover letters. I think that they're a pain to write, but they're worth it, because they give you, as a reviewer, I can see much more clearly how your writing skills are. A bulleted resume is going to give me some indication of your ability to write, but actually writing full paragraphs and sentences in a cover letter kind of stands out. It also gives you an opportunity to connect the pieces of your resume. So if you have, a coursework here and research here, and then you did an internship here and you volunteered there, there's probably some skill set that you've developed, and through the process of your cover letter, you can tie all those pieces together, and also give kind of that indication of, maybe I haven't had an internship, but this is what I can apply forward to a job. So it's like going that extra step, and especially when things are more competitive, just keeping everything tight and adding that bonus of a cover letter, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, whatever you can do to get yourself to stand out, right?
Exactly.
Going that extra mile. Kelly, can you talk about what you look for in a resume?
Absolutely. I think that Alyssa had some really great pieces of advice, especially with the cover letter. The cover letter is your opportunity to show the business that you're applying for that you know about what they do and why you're interested in them as well. It's not just enough for us to know about just, things that you've done, but we want to know that you're interested in being a part of our organization. So make sure that before you write that cover letter, research the company that you're applying for, and don't make it a generic cover letter that can apply to all companies. Mention specific projects they've worked on. Most companies, and Alyssa, you could, just nod or whatever. You guys have all of your stuff posted online, right? Of things that you've worked on or projects or stuff that you actually focus on, I'm assuming. So most companies are going to have that available on their website. So gear that towards the position that you're applying for, because it makes it look like, again, you care and you're not just applying to every single place that you come across. And absolutely have somebody review it and make sure that I can look through your resume in under 2 minutes, because I'm not going to read every single word that's on there in general. I'm going to really look at those bulleted things and see if you're meeting the skill set that's necessary. Lastly, I just say that make sure you look at the job description. If you're looking at a posting that's online, there will be keywords of things that they want in there for specific skills that company's looking for. So make sure that you include those keywords, because that will get you a lot farther as well.
Absolutely. That's some great advice. And I do want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, we welcome those. We love to hear them. Please share them in the chat box. If you have any questions. If you do not have access to the chat box, you can also email them to professional@asce.org. For our next question, we want to ask, for those unable to find employment, what would you recommend they do in the meantime? So say I'm a graduating senior, I graduate and I'm not able to find a position, June, July, August, September. What are some of the things that I could maybe do in the meantime to still make myself competitive looking at a job going forward? Christina, is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think as you are graduating, or in any place in your career, if you're in the process of trying to find a new position right now, or really any time, I think there's a few things that you can consider. One, you can always work on improving yourself, whether that means going back and getting your master's degree, starting straight out. Kelly mentioned that she went through and got her master's degree. I graduated, I moved to Vegas and started my master's degree that following fall while I was working. But get that additional education. I truly have never met anyone who was like, darn, I got too much. It will help you in your career. So if getting a master's degree is an option for you, I would recommend that you start that process. And even if you don't finish it, at least, take some classes, continue to improve yourself in that way. I would also suggest, if while you're doing that, if at all possible, any job is better than no job, because it shows that you have that initiative, you're willing to work, and you're going to be practicing all your team player skills and your communication skills. So any job is better than no job. And so keep that in mind as you're working through this. Another couple of things, continue to work on your skill set, not just like the technical stuff that you're going to learn in a classroom, but how are you going to make sure that you present well when you're doing an online interview? Because right now, if you're continuing to look for a job, you're likely going to be doing an online interview. So practice your skill set on that, making sure that your camera isn't way above your head so that they're looking up your nose, or that you're down here. Practice those things and work and engage with your friends, your family, your peers. Practice answering questions. Get comfortable with the media that we're using today. And then the other thing I would do, and this is just kind of something that I encourage everybody to do, especially right now when we're all pretty much working from home, is set yourself a schedule and keep that schedule. Make sure that, wake up at a certain time. And if you generally work out in the mornings, wake up at the time, work out in the morning, set yourself a schedule, make sure you do something at lunch so that you have some sort of normalcy. That'll enable you to better engage as you do your studies, as you work to do virtual and online interviews. And it'll also just help with your mental health and maybe help prevent the frustration getting the best of you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some great advice. Marley, what's some of the advice that you're sharing with some of your students as far as positioning themselves?
I think I'm going to be repetitive for what Christina said, that the advanced degree, it's a great time to consider that. I mentioned I started at the DOT after getting my bachelor's degree, but then with the recession, I thought it was a real great time to go back and get my master's degree, and I did that. And like she mentioned, it doesn't hurt you. It always, will help you, but it's not to your disadvantage to do that. So certainly consider an advanced degree, whether it's in engineering or an MBA or whatever might be beneficial for your particular position. And also, we had done a survey with the students here, and one of the things that they mentioned that was really key to keeping them on track and keeping them engaged and moving forward was the schedule. So I do think that, having that schedule, maintaining that is critical. And the idea of other jobs, we may not think it's ideal to get a job outside of engineering. However, a lot of times the skill sets that we learn in those other jobs can be very beneficial, even if you're just, working with people over the phone or, anything. There's a lot of transferable skills that would be beneficial to you later. So I would certainly consider that. And I think, to try to stay positive is really key also. I know it's, really a hard time sometimes to do that, but it's very important to maintain that positive attitude. And I think it also comes across as we're doing the video interviews. So if you have that positive attitude, they're going to see that. They're going to, believe that you fit into that work environment better by having that positive attitude. So I think that maintaining that, and I know it's stressful, and I know there's a lot of anxiety out there, and I understand that. If it gets to be too much, certainly look for some way to release that or to get some community support, because there are a lot of people going through exactly what you're going through. So don't be afraid to lean on your friends and family to help you through that.
Yeah, that's really important advice, and it's something that I think we all need to hear, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So this next question I really like. Is it wise to apply to a number of positions in a single company at the same time? Kelly, is that something that you want to speak to? What has your experience been?
Well, to be honest, I've really only had 3 jobs over the past 12 years, so I haven't personally done that. I don't know if perhaps Christina would know more about that, since you work in a large organization where there are often multiple job openings available, because I think that you might be able to answer that a little bit better than me.
All right, hot potato. Here, tag, you're it.
I just don't know if I have great advice. I don't know.
I wouldn't hold it against somebody if they applied to multiple jobs. If you're looking for a job and you have an interest in a variety of jobs, I say apply, because you never know where the right position is going to be. Marley mentioned earlier that, the DOT wasn't exactly her dream job when she first, when she got that job. And I'll tell you that when I graduated, I wanted to do traffic and transportation. And that job that I finally got was in flood control. And so if you're, again, it's that flexibility. If you're looking for a job, you might just find the right job by applying for multiple jobs. I don't think it matters if it's at the same company. A tiny company, they might notice that a tiny company probably isn't hiring for 5 different positions at the same time, but they might notice that. And so maybe you can cover that in your cover letter and explain why you're applying for multiple positions at this small. But if you're applying for a job at NDOT or at AECom or at Jacobs, it's all through an electronic HR process, and nobody's even going to necessarily know that you applied for multiple jobs at the same company. And so I kind of think like it's like hockey, you miss every shot you don't take, right? So go for it.
That's great advice. Alyssa, do you have anything to add to that perspective?
I mean, Christina definitely covered most of it. I would say I worked at AECom. I've worked at a 2-person company, kind of the full spectrum of sizes. And I think that really just gauging, making sure you know how big the company is a reasonable way to go. I've gotten a job through applying on an online job app. All of my positions have come through networking. And I think that from my experience, that's been more successful, just blasting your resume off a bunch to lots of job postings. So I think kind of adding on what you can be doing during this time is building your network. So reaching out to people who you know through ACE, you can set up video calls with them like you would do as a coffee date, instead just as an informational interview, because most people are really happy to help other people and talk to people about their experiences. And that's kind of how I got like my first jobs, was by just networking forever. And I had a spreadsheet and I was keeping track of, you know, who would I talk to last and what they'd recommended or when I should circle back to them. And I think the key with that for me too was asking for them to give me 3 more people to talk to. Like, who else do you recommend that I speak with? Because everybody knows you're looking. It's not like we're all competing and out to get each other. We all want to help each other. So I was then able to continue to build that network by saying, okay, cool, this person referred me to you. Like Christina was saying, just having the names. So you're not calling somebody or some empty company, and then your spreadsheet can grow over time, but it's something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times you don't realize the power of networking, right? So this is a great question. How much emphasis should current job hunters put on creating or polishing up their online presences? For example, LinkedIn, especially for students with very little experience. Are employers really looking at these? And is there anything in particular job hunters should focus on? It can be tempting to go down the optimize every social media profile hole. Christina, I guess you probably, deal with hiring a lot of people. How much do you all look at LinkedIn profiles and social presence?
My current role, I don't really look at the social media as much as I do look at the resume in the background. But that's probably because of the level of professional that I'm hiring is not likely to be as much on the social media. I guess they might be on LinkedIn, and I might look at that to really see how their professional career has evolved. But really, I'm not using the social media as much. In previous careers, when I was hiring new entries to the field, we would occasionally look at the social media, the Facebook, not LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, those, to really see what sort of a presence folks have on and who they are. It's not as much a presence, but who the person is, really trying to get a little bit more insight. And typically, if we were doing that, it was prior to the interview, in terms of as we were trying to cull the candidates to determine who we might interview. Like I said, we aren't really doing that much these days. But I think everybody should be aware of what your social media presence is. No matter where you are in your career, you're always interviewing for your next job. You're, quite frankly, always interviewing for your current job. And so I think making sure that you have a smart online presence is always a good thing, whether it's on LinkedIn, and you might not be posting a lot of articles yourself, but what are you reading and what are you sharing and what do you find of interest that somebody else posts? That shows kind of, again, who you are and what you're looking for. So I think it's a good idea to make sure that your online presence, it reflects who you are and who you want people to see you as.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Marley, do you have anything to share? Is there advice that you give your students about their online presence?
I think Christina kind of took that one and nailed it, basically, that you want to be aware of it. You want to make sure it's a positive presence, because they may not be evaluating that for every position, particularly the more professional positions that people are seeking. But those entry-level positions, when they get down to that interview process, I do think that's a point where those online social media links can have an impact. So I think people do want to be aware of that. They should have a positive presence to show their employers just kind of who they are, because with the interview process, you're so limited on time. You don't have a lot of time to get to know the applicants as well as you'd like to. And so it is an avenue that some of the employers utilize to kind of learn a little bit more about the individuals. So certainly, have it be available, have it be positive.
Awesome. Kelly, Alyssa, do you have anything to add to your social media presence and kind of what you all have done?
Well, I would just say that just keep in mind that your social media presence is in your control. So you can create your own brand. So decide what your brand is, and you can publish that and make that social media presence what really create that for what you want other people to see. And I think that's really important to realize that you can control that. So use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we've got another question. What knowledge and skills were most helpful to you in finding employment? So, Alyssa, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Sure. I think that for me, a lot of it was, as I said, I did a lot of networking for a long time to get my job. And some of it was ASE connections, some of it was otherwise, but people, if they're through kind of those coffee dates or whatever, a lot of it has to do with your communication skills and how you present yourself. And people are they're gonna judge you based on your resume, but they're also gonna judge you based on how well you can hold a conversation, and do you make eye contact, and are you asking good questions. So I think that just practicing having conversations with people, like it's very stressful, I think, when you're first looking for a job to be talking to all these people who could hire you and pay you and everything. But they're people too, and they just want to have a chance to get to know you. So if you can put yourself in situations where you're practicing just communicating with people you don't know as well, or being relaxed in those situations, I think that's really helpful. Writing skills, like I said, with cover letters, all the soft skills basically that you maybe didn't get as much of in school, I think can come across really clearly when you're communicating with people, and that's going to make you stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, did you have anything that you wanted to add? What were some of the skills that you found helpful as you were looking for your first position?
I think Alyssa really hit it with communication skills, both verbal and written, are really important because that's what people are going to be able to see from you if they're not communicating with you any other way. But I mean, really, it's that kind of verbal and written. And then I think in general, being able to show that you're responsible and motivated, because even if for me, because I hire a lot of students on campus, even if a student doesn't have a higher GPA, like you don't need a 4.0 to be a really successful worker. I think it's important to be able to show that you can work well with other people, that you can show up on time and you can get your work done. Those are the three things I really look for. And if you can somehow in either things that you've done, jobs that you had, competition teams that you've participated in, other volunteer activities, I think that's really helpful as well. So if you can get that across, that would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah, so maybe those are good skills to add on your resume. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, either out on your resume or somehow in the cover letter, but in some way communicate all of those things that you have those other types of skills that people would be happy to have you working for them and with them in an office.
Yeah, absolutely. Christina, Marley, do you have anything to add?
You know, one thing that Alyssa mentioned is the networking that she did, and you know, doing those coffee chats, and just as you build your network. She mentioned a couple of things. Asking good questions. You have to also engage. You have to engage in the conversation. You have to know what you want out of the conversation. So it's good use of both parties' time. But then the other thing I would also recommend that you do is practice your interviews. There are so many times that I've interviewed people who I knew were fantastic, and they came into the interview and it killed their opportunity because they just interviewed terribly. And even though I knew they had all of this in their background, they didn't communicate that in the interview. It wasn't just that they were flat in the interview. They literally did not share any of the information that I knew, but the other panelists didn't necessarily know. And so I would say, if you can, practice your interview. I didn't mention this in my intro, but I'm past president of ASCE. And when I was getting ready to do those interviews for ASCE, I practiced those interviews with multiple groups of people many times. So I practiced with the student chapter. I practiced with my colleagues at work. I practiced with some just friends in ASCE. And I asked them, I said, just ask me any question. And they're like, well, I don't know what question to ask because I don't know what I'm like, just ask me anything. Ask me what cereal I had this morning. Ask me what my favorite workout is, just so that I could start getting comfortable answering questions, because if you're gonna, interviews are stressful. They're stressful for everybody. And if your inclination when you're stressed is to clam up and not share, or just share the very basic information, you're probably not going to win that interview. So get used to answering questions and practice.
Absolutely. That's really great advice as far as practicing. Practice makes perfect, right?
Well,
It's
and
cliche,
get
but
feedback.
it's
Let them tell you if you didn't say it, get feedback and then practice again.
absolutely. Christina, have you ever been involved with Toastmasters?
I haven't. I tried once. It was a lot of work.
It is a lot.
But I haven't, and I did try once, and it was a lot of work. But the people that I know who have done it and have stuck with it are stellar communicators, and the work is worth it, and it really does help them develop their skills and become better communicators. Just because I failed.
No, but I love your honesty with that, though. Awesome. So here's a great question, and you all have talked about networking and how important it is, and in the summer months and in the fall, in-person networking will become really important. But right now, clearly in-person networking events aren't going on. Do you have any tips or do's and don'ts to share for job hunters who are trying to network online? Alyssa, is that something that you can speak to?
Sure. I have not done that online because this is the first time we're all experiencing this, obviously. But I think that being able to set up, like you can approach it very similarly to as if you were able to meet with someone in person. So if you have that preliminary contact through somebody you've met at ASCE, or you go to ASCE's website and you send an email and reach out to somebody and ask for their help, or any of us, I'm sure, are happy to help with connecting anybody. Being able to just write a good intro email, say, hey, I know this is a tough time for everybody. Here's my resume, here's my cover letter. This is what I'm interested in doing. Would you be available to have a chat sometime? A video chat or phone call, whatever is their preference, and just be persistent with that with different people and get things scheduled and be responsive and direct. And I think a lot of people, because we're all kind of getting into this headspace of having video calls anyway, somebody's not going to balk at that as a suggestion. It's going to come off probably as a good thing. You're taking the initiative and you're trying to continue to build your network even when you can't meet people in person.
Absolutely. Marley, do you have anything to add?
Well, Christina had mentioned practicing for interviews. I would say practicing for this as well would be a really good thing to do. And I think there's a lot of civil engineers out there, us included, that love to talk about what they do and, answer questions and kind of be that outlet for people. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to find people who'd be willing to work with you and just practice doing that and giving you some helpful hints. So I would certainly take advantage of that.
Awesome. That's all really great advice. Kelly, Christina, do you have anything to add to online networking?
Yeah, I actually have noticed, because I do follow a lot of ASCE groups on Instagram and some other platforms, and there are several groups that are doing, networking events virtually. So you could definitely join in some of those, or just really start interacting with people online. It's not just about video calls and chatting. You can interact with your local ASCE student chapter online, professional branch. They have a lot of people are holding home office decorating contests right now. And there's a lot of things that are going on virtually that you can still participate in, and you can get on people's radar by being a part of that. And then we've talked a little bit earlier about LinkedIn. I think that it was Marley was talking about LinkedIn, or maybe it was Christina, about the things that you post on LinkedIn and how you utilize LinkedIn. That's a great social networking platform for people who are actually looking for jobs. You can start reading stuff, sharing things, following different types of companies. And I think that would also be another way to leverage social media and a virtual context for trying to meet people.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great advice. Christina, do you have anything to add?
Don't make it hard. sometimes the ask, I've had this where like, oh, can I reach out to you? Or I say, yeah, please definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And then the ask comes in and it's like, I can't do this right now. And really, I don't want to because it's too much. The more straightforward, the more flexible. You do need to have a little bit of that context that Alyssa mentioned, like why you want to have the conversation, but don't make it hard. And I wish I could explain that better, but don't make it hard.
Absolutely. And going with that question, that I have is, you reach out, you make the ask, you don't hear back. What do you do then? How many days is it appropriate to reach back out? Marley, do you have any insights on, kind of the etiquette there?
And they're asking the ask for the online communication? Is that?
Yeah, I guess maybe just to connect online, or maybe even to have a conversation where you share, some of your expertise with them. Maybe it's somebody that wants to come in and study under you.
It probably depends on the particular situation, but a lot of times I find when I do get those asks, they kind of get lost in all the other asks. So I think that getting a reminder is okay. I don't mind getting reminders. It's like, oh yes, that was out there. I apologize. Totally forgot about it. I, try to flag things in my email, make them stand out different ways, but things just get lost sometimes. So I would say, as far as a time frame, wait at least a couple of days probably, because maybe it's just, I need to get caught up on email. So, if you're calling me before I even had a chance to review where the ask was, that might not be good. But after a couple days, maybe 3 days to a week would be a good time frame to, just a little reminder. Hey, I sent you this earlier, but I didn't hear back, and most people are more than happy to respond to that.
Absolutely. Kelly, do you have any thoughts on what are some of your strategies as far as that goes?
Yeah, I'd say a week is a good time frame because at least that's kind of given somebody time to digest it. And perhaps they were just having a really busy week at work. We all have those busy weeks at work, busy weeks at school. So maybe the next week is a good time. And then you could also just with the reminder email say, I know I emailed you about a week ago. I'm not sure if this is an option for you. If not, could you suggest somebody else I could talk to? Perhaps it's just not something they have time for right now, but maybe they could give you some other great contact of somebody who could talk to you. And that is, now expanding your network.
Absolutely. That's great advice. We probably have time for about one more question. Does anyone else want to share a question in the chat box? I know all of you are great, great networkers, right? I thought maybe it'd be appropriate to maybe share some of your thoughts on networking a little bit, because that's been a theme that's come up quite a few times. Maybe do you all have one specific networking strategy that you use above any other one? Christina, do you want to start?
I hate networking. I'm a total introvert. I hate networking. And so to me, my version of networking is somehow engaging. So ASE has actually been a really good way for me to network because I'm doing something. So it started with when I got involved with the younger members, I got involved on a project. So all of my networking was showing up at the project and working and doing something and then creating those relationships. It made it much more meaningful to me. So that's one thing. And I guess my other thing, which would be the tip, is I learned pretty early on that what I do is when I walk into the room, I go straight to the person that I already know and I sit and I talk to them and I don't meet anybody new. And I think frequently we do that. And so what I started doing was when I would go to an ASCE lunch or any ASCE event for that matter, as I worked through my ASCE roles, I would walk in, find a table, drop my purse and leave. Or mark my napkin and leave. And then when I came back to the table, I was likely to end up sitting with people that I didn't know, hadn't met before, and therefore was able to meet new people, grow my network, and have new conversations. It doesn't always work well when you're really looking forward to seeing your friends and the only time you see them is at ASCE events, but but it does help if you're trying to build your network and trying to grow your career and your future.
Absolutely. Alyssa, do you want to share your top networking tip?
Sure. I really like that drop your purse and leave. I'm gonna have to try that. I am an extrovert, so I like talking to people and meeting people, but when I first started networking, it was kind of terrifying because you just don't, it takes practice to walk up to somebody you don't know and start a conversation with them. So I think there's kind of two things I would recommend. I think if you are going to a networking event, and this is when we can do things in person again, obviously, if you go with somebody and you kind of make a plan like, okay, we're going together, but we're not going to talk to each other, or we're going to try to, we're going to go meet people together and then we're going to split up and we're going to have tried to meet, 3 people or something. And you've got somebody else in the room that when you start feeling uncomfortable, you can go kind of talk to them for a little bit, refresh, go back out there. You're not just approaching it all by yourself, and you can kind of build off of each other's energy. I think that from a virtual networking standpoint, we've talked about LinkedIn. I get LinkedIn requests randomly from people all the time. And if I've never met you before, I'm probably not going to accept a connection because I feel like the people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, it means that I'm vouching for them in some way. If somebody saw that I was connected to them, it means that, oh, I know Alyssa for whatever reason, this person knows her, they're probably going to fit whatever criteria. And if I've never met you, I don't necessarily have that trust or understanding of what our relationship is. But I think you can send, so I guess the biggest thing is if you're trying to connect on LinkedIn, send a message with your connection request if you're trying to contact somebody you've never met before, but you want to talk to them. So you can say, hey, this is why I'm sending you a, LinkedIn request. And I was wondering if you'd be able to chat at some point, and then the onus is kind of on me. And I've definitely had people do that. And then I set up a call with them and I maybe accept the connection after we've talked, but at least it's giving me, okay, you're not just floating through LinkedIn, clicking connect to everybody you possibly could connect to. You're putting a little bit more effort into it. And then there are bound to be people who see, oh yeah, sure, I can take an hour and talk and get in touch with you and set that up.
Absolutely, that's great advice. So we've got 2 more questions in the chat box. How appropriate is it to contact the job poster personally to make an impression? Is it okay to ask questions to the recruiter and at the same time send your resume personally? Marley, do you have any advice to give about this one?
I think it's okay, but you want to be cautious about doing that because you don't want to feel like you're trying to go around somebody. But if you come at it from an angle that I am so interested in this position, this is really key for me to get my name in here because it is something I really desire to do, or maybe it's the company that you really like what that particular company does or projects that they work on. So if there's that motivation because you are so interested in the position, then I think that it's probably okay to do that. But if it's one of 100 and you're really not that interested, maybe you don't want to take that extra step.
Yeah. Kelly, did you have anything to add to that?
No, but I do have a great answer for the next question in the chat box. So, but I don't specifically have any advice about recruiters. So if anybody else has advice, then I'd pass that off to them.
Christina, I was going to turn to you next. Did you have anything to add?
Oh, no, I would just be careful with it. A lot of times the person that you're emailing really is trusting the process to happen and is looking for it to get vetted. And so just be careful with it. If you already have a personal connection with that, letting them know, hey, might not be a bad idea, but just be careful with that.
Awesome. So the next question in the chat box is, what networking tips do you have for introverts? Maybe more relevant for when we can have in-person events again. So Kelly, I'll let you go ahead and start off with this one.
So I'll start by saying that I'm now developing a leadership and management class for engineers. And one of the topics that I've learned that I'm going to teach is how to network with other people, and specifically what to do for introverts. And I found an amazing video on YouTube that is called Networking with Introverts or something like that. I'm pretty sure you could find it if you Googled that. But if you want me to give you the link, feel free to get my contact information. I can email it to you. But I think the hardest thing that introverts, or the hardest problem that introverts have, is they hear a question and they answer that question. When I ask you, how are you doing today? I'm looking for an opening to say, oh yeah, the weather's great outside. I'm looking to start a conversation. I'm not really looking for you to say, I'm terrible. So think about how you can expand on whatever question the person is asking without necessarily answering it as a direct question, is like, this is specifically what you asked and it's not a yes or no question. So conversely, when you're asking questions, don't ask yes or no questions. Ask questions that the people have to elaborate on. Not how are you doing today, or like, how are things going for you? Ask, what's been keeping you busy lately? That one is really great line, because it doesn't mean like, what have you been doing at work? Like you're not restricting it. So if somebody hasn't been doing the thing that maybe you thought they've been doing for this long time, they can tell you that, and they can offer whatever information. So there's some really great information in this video, and I can definitely share it with you, but I thought that was fantastic. Communicating with introverts.
Awesome. That's great advice. If you share that with me after the call, I can probably share that out when I send the recording out too. So that would probably work. But Marley, did you have any advice on networking for introverts?
I would also say, don't be intimidated by positions. I think a lot of times, particularly for younger individuals, when somebody comes in a higher position, they're intimidated by that. And try not to let that, I know it's hard because it might be past president of ASCE, or something that you're like, wow, how is this person talking to me? But we're all individuals. We all have a common interest, for ASCE within civil engineering. So we want to be able to talk about doing things, and so I think that's one of the key things, is in addition to what Kelly's already mentioned.
Awesome. So it's 3:56, so I think we can pretty much wrap up here, but I wanted to give you all the opportunity to share some closing thoughts on positioning yourself for employment within the next coming months with all the impact of COVID-19. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure. I think there was some really great mention earlier about being flexible, and I think that is really important. I know in 2008, I knew a lot of people in Reno who could not get a job here, and a lot of people moved away, which was disappointing because they were a lot of my friends, and now they live in all sorts of different places. But flexibility and patience, I think, will be really key. And we're all navigating this weird thing at the same time, and we all don't really know what to do. So know that we're also there with you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always good to know you're not alone, right? Alyssa, do you want to share some closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think, wrapping it, networking is kind of the key. I also think what Marley said earlier, and Christina, about schedule and routine and really like taking care of yourself. I've got all kinds of fun mental health things, and I think that for me, that's just really helpful to kind of stay grounded during all of this crazy uncertainty, and putting yourself in that positive headspace is going to help you just as you're communicating with other people, and ideally make everything a little bit less stressful overall. So really take the time to continue to check in with yourself and give yourself space and patience, and know that we're all kind of in the same boat in some way. And if you're looking for a job, you're not going to be the only one who's having a hard time doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to think about other people that are in the same exact shoes. Marley, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Well, I would say, particularly for the younger ASCE members, people who are getting ready to graduate, it's really a stressful time, irregardless of the COVID-19 situation. So like was mentioned, do what you need to do to stay mentally and emotionally strong. That's important for you to do. Keep positive, and I know that that's hard to do sometimes with everything changing and just the unknowns that we have out there. But it's kind of key, I think, to do. Temper your expectations. If your expectations are way up there and you just feel like they're not going to be met and you're really getting down about that, things will come around. Things will change. They always do. So just kind of keep that in check. Be brave, endure, and be optimistic.
Absolutely. Positivity is key. Christina, I'll turn to you to close us out with some closing remarks.
So what can I say that hasn't already been said before? I would just reiterate: be flexible. Find the silver lining. As we're all doing various aspects of surviving through COVID crisis, there are silver linings, and so identify those and figure out how those are going to help make you stronger and better as we come out of it, and make you a better employee, make you a better civil engineer. And then give yourself grace. We've all talked about that, and it's something that is a reality as we are socially distanced. And if you're looking for work and not finding it, it is easy to fall into a not really great space in your mental health and your physical health. So give yourself grace and find ways to take care of yourself. And then just remember, this is not permanent. We're all in it together. If we all work together at this, we're actually going to come out stronger, and there'll be even more opportunities for you to grow and advance and really contribute to the industry moving forward.
Absolutely. Those are some great insights. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us. And I did want to remind everyone that ASC members are welcome to continue this conversation on Collaborate. That's a great network for ASC members to connect with so they don't feel alone. I'd also be happy to talk with anyone who is not an ASC member about the benefits and resources that ASCE provides. So please feel free to contact me directly. Everyone should have my contact information. I will be sending this recording out to you all, hopefully tomorrow. But thanks again to all of our panelists, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a great afternoon.